Okay, we're recording. Okay. So, we're going to review the agenda for tonight. There's really, there are a couple of changes from maybe one or two changes from last week. On the public hearings, which will be our first item of business after the local law. The first public hearing is on the rezone on Phillip and Hamilton downtown. So that will be, that's also, I guess, came out of committee.
Yes.
So if everything goes okay, we can move for passage of that later on. So we'll have that public hearing. The second public hearing on the telecommunications installation is canceled. That legislation is going through some amendments that will provide a lot more detail in it. And so when that comes back and the planning committee comes back, at some point, that'll get back on a hearing cycle, but right now that hearing is canceled for tonight.
And actually, we're going to, I didn't mention this to you, so we're going to meet on that telecommunications same night we're meeting on the walkable Albany.
Sounds good. Right, actually, you're meeting on the 20-something? 26th, I believe?
That's
Yep.
Thursday.
Okay, so that is being added to the 26th?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
You're going to notice that? Get that? Can you notice? The
Um,
28th? The 20, the...
Oh, I'm sorry, let me
The
check.
small cell tower ordinance revised.
That's being added to the planning committee meeting on the 26th.
Yeah, I was waiting for the amendments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
working on it. She knows she needs it to have it.
Okay.
She thought she could.
All right. On the local laws, item 2, local law C, which relates to installment payments on property tax, is a pass. And local law D from Mr. Flynn, which relates to updating a title from Commissioner of Public Works to General Services, is a pass. Any questions on those two? On ordinances held, so if we go then down to item number 5 by Mr. Johnson, that is the rezone, which presumably will be a pass. And the remaining ordinances are held. And on the introduction of resolutions, 65 is going to be by Ms. Farrell. That's reappointing Steve McLaughlin. That's an introduction for tonight. And Dr. Michelle, can you invite him to our next Wednesday caucus? And so we'll have Mr. McLaughlin hopefully at our next Wednesday caucus, so we can talk to him. The other resolution, 669219R, this relates to our participation in the Empire State Municipal Purchasing Group. So this is some further developments on this. We are actually, some feedback with Marissa. Apparently we are already a member of this group, the purchasing group, and we did pass a resolution back in 2014 authorizing, but only with municipalities in Albany County. So we're already part of it, and I sent out a link earlier today. If people looked at that link, they would have seen the participating agencies. Albany County is part of it. A lot of other municipalities, local, et cetera, are part of it. We're listed as part of it. Turns out we are part of it, but the authorization we did in 2014 was only for other municipalities within Albany County. This would expand that, so that restriction is not on there. I'm okay moving forward with this.
Would it be an amendment then to the 2014, or would this override?
It would override. It's just a broader authorization. So unless people have a problem, I'm okay moving forward. It's just an authorization to participate in a group purchasing program. Is everybody okay with moving this tonight?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was carrying it.
About 65,
65 is Ginny. We have one MC by Mr. Hoey, 679219R, which has been passed around or is here as was sent out. This is welcoming Francis Ford Coppola to Albany. As people might be familiar, it's part of the Writers Institute. One of the programs they have is a showing of the Cotton Club, which I never saw when it came out.
Well, he redid it. And
Yeah,
what's
was it-
interesting, when he originally did it, the producers said there was too much black in the movie.
Uh-huh.
So I want everybody to hear it. I want to make sure it's right in the filming. So he redid it with his own money and put all those scenes that were cut out
Right.
back in. Because, and that's the difference in the world between, I think it was 84 when it came out,
Yeah.
and today. So, if anybody has, reservations because of that, I thought it was a great.
Yes. So he will be here for a screening, and as part of one of the programs in the Writers Institute, William Kennedy, who is also one of the contributors who did the screenplay, will also be a part of the program to screen it and then to discuss the film and have audience. And these programs, Writers Institute programs, are free and open to the public. I don't remember when this one is.
It's $25. Yeah.
Oh, this one might. Some of them might be more. Is this one at the 8?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Some of them are free. Most of them are free. Some of them, they all aren't. So if you have an opportunity, it might be an interesting program to go to. In any event, this would be a pass if everybody's okay with that? Okay. And then finally, on the other resolutions held, dun 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 dun. Is he coming here to do this? What? Is he coming here? Yeah, we got a picture. Who's the resolution? Coppola? No, he's not coming here. No, he's not coming here.
Oh, no.
I was like, whoa.
I'm trying to figure this out. I wish. Yeah, I go to see.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I thought the whole idea of doing a resolution is to force him to come and be honored. I agree.
Somebody can, I'm sure Alusa can find a way to get himself on stage. And,
Some free cookies.
so he won't be here. And I'll tell you who else won't be here tonight is the Albany Empire.
Why are we holding it? The mayor already recognized them. Just pass the damn thing and send it to you. The mayor already recognized them. Why are we doing this?
So we want to do it, because we've done that with something else, right? So we want to do a presentation. It's up to you guys, whatever you want to do. Jack, it's your resolution. So we'll hold that for tonight.
What is their, what would they come to city council? They already did it with the mayor, big.
No, they're going to be coming, so.
Okay.
This is a local. All right. Finally, Resolution 6391 is the rules change related to sponsorship of legislation. That was going to be a pass. And that's all I have on the agenda for tonight. Any questions? Any questions on agenda items? Okay. You want to talk anything about the budget schedule also?
I do.
All right,
Did everybody get a copy of the revised budget schedule?
Yes.
This is very similar to the schedule that we had last year, and I plan to send it out to all department heads and to let them know that this is the schedule that we've planned. Sometimes we wind up having a department head say, oh, I can't meet on that date, and then what we look to do is just flip them with some other department rather than picking entirely new dates. And that has worked the last couple of years. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But before I do this, I just wanted to get people to focus on these dates, and especially members of the Finance Committee. Ginny, Dorsey, and Mike are here right now to let us know if there's any dates that you cannot attend. We don't require, because we're generally not taking action at these, we don't generally require a quorum for it. However, I do prefer to schedule when I can to have a quorum. So have you taken a look at these dates and on your calendars? And
Yeah, I was just about to send Michelle another note. The only date that I have an issue with is the 9th, and I just need to leave early, like I need to leave by like 7.
Who's on for the 9th?
It's the workshop.
It's a workshop.
Oh,
So it should,
and all of these are going to be recorded, right?
yes.
And they'll all be posted.
Yep.
So I've actually found that helpful, some meetings that I have not been able to make, to go to the YouTube page and to listen, like the planning meeting on the cell tower stuff. So if you're not able to make any of those meetings or any meeting that's recorded, I really encourage you guys to listen, including caucuses that are recorded.
So, again, I'm planning on sending this out tomorrow, assuming my computer doesn't continue to stress me out beyond, I'm on a learning curve, folks, and it's not fun. New software, database missing, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the second thing I would like to talk about is I drafted up a memo to the mayor from the finance committee that I shared with all of you. And as we discussed, Dorsey had thought that we could be a little bit more to the point. I have her edits, and essentially what she's done is she's rearranged it so that we're not leading off with last year's recommendations, but the things that I think are finding a little bit more pressing. She's changed very little of the language that I use discussing each one of those points. The three things that I think are key in what she has recommended or noted is that she doesn't, and I agree with, she doesn't think that our raising the issue of police and DGS vacancies and their impact on services is appropriate in this memo, because really it's not part of the budget. It is something ongoing with regard to how the city is dealing with those vacancies. It does have some potential impact on savings, and we can discuss that, but I think that in terms of saying to the mayor and to the budget director, here are things that we want you to be sure to address in the budget as it's being introduced, there really is nothing to be addressed on that particular point as part of the budget.
Well, I know when Sergio was in front of us in June, he made the vacancy a big problem in terms of what services he was able to provide. And unabashedly said he needed more people available. I think he said 20%. He was giving us an estimate, but he said 20%. So to me, that's pretty significant.
But it's not
Isn't
like
it-
the 2020 budget is going to come out with a 20% reduction in staff, we don't think.
No, I think they'll have virtually the same staff, but
I think
I
it's
guess my
something to
issue
be
is, what do they do
raised.
with the extra money? Because whenever we say, you know, like I say, I have no street lights on Rapp Road, Pine Lane, and Frontage Street, always have people walking in cars, moving. And it's always, show us the revenue for doing that, and walking past. Well, there is some revenue.
It's not revenue, it's savings.
Well,
Yeah.
money.
Yeah,
Money.
yeah.
So, I
Show us
mean,
the money.
in whatever
That's a lot.
context you wanna raise it, I think it should be raised.
Right, but the question becomes, should it be raised in this document, this list of recommendations? Because if you read the text, most of the text speak to a solution, and then also there is some recommendation for a figure of resources that should be allocated to that solution. When you get to the vacancies, it changes the tenor and tone of the recommendations. Really, it boils down to, for example, with the recommendation for the police vacancies, negotiations that are taking place, which is outside of the council's purview. So I agree with you that those issues need to be raised. The question is this the most appropriate document to raise the issues? And lastly, Mike, you know, this is the 11th hour with respect to this document. And I think if it were me receiving this document at this 11th hour, we want to be succinct to the issues that we want strongly considered for the budget. which are highlighted there, and not this hodgepodge of council concerns and issues.
But it was not the 11th hour in June when we raised it with Sergio.
So,
Okay,
can I-
wait just a moment.
Can I just say-
Let's understand, again, we're talking about the budget, you're talking about there being potential savings. That's in 2019. We are not going to ask them to budget additional vacancy savings in the 2020 budget, because our goal is not to have them reduce staff. I think our goal is that they be fully staffed. So I think that that is part of the dialogue that we have when we bring each one of these departments in, but I don't think there's something, we're not asking the mayor or the budget director to do something in the budget about those particular issues.
The funding is there for the positions. The question is not adding more money to fill vacancies. The funding is
Well,
there.
and the question is,
It's just-
where did that money go? What was it used for?
Well, that's something you can have discussion when you have the budget meetings.
That's another question.
That's a different issue.
I
Yeah.
agree with you.
Right.
If they went in there.
So unless
Yeah.
a majority of people want to say, yeah, that should be in there, I'm more comfortable taking it out and still having that conversation as the departments come before us.
I have
I'm fine
a
with
very big concern, I don't think actually has to go into something like that. But we get a lot of feedback from people all about the trees in the cities. We've cut so many down, and we're not really cutting them. It used to be a beautiful city, I have streets that there are no trees left behind. And they do only have one truck, we used to have the leftover one that they use for storage and stuff.
Well,
It's terrible.
actually, it's interesting, because back in June, we asked them about that, and they said they were going to staff both trucks.
I think they should have 5 more on the trees.
Sergio, back in June, when they asked him, he said they were going to staff both trucks. At one point, they had no forest staff.
Well, the one truck, when we got the new one, I said, at least hold on to the other one. Okay, for emergencies, and you run it right into the ground. But it is a big concern that I have, and I don't know if anybody else has.
And,
It's not like the nation cities, down the road, playing around.
Okay,
oh, I agree with you.
so am I hearing,
Well, I think the
are there a
majority-
majority of people who want us to put something in? So we're dealing with streets, roads, sidewalk issues here. We're dealing with parks, issues with the parks. We're dealing with regulatory compliance. Does this rise to that level that we want to say to the mayor and include more money in the budget to ensure that more of our street trees are being replaced?
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
Judy, I got a question for you.
Wait just a moment. Wait just a moment.
No, wait all this.
So I would say yes.
All right.
What the heck? It is.
Before we talk about other things, I want to get through what Ms. Pliers took the time to provide me with comments on, and I appreciate that. With regard to what we said about increasing funding for seniors and youth programming, I believe that essentially the point you were making. Now, there has been an issue in Hoffman Park with that building being in disrepair and not being adequate for programming, which there's supposed to be progress on, and we have bonded some funding for. But my sense is you're saying that with regard to Hoffman Park, you don't feel like there's an issue with the adequacy of the programming there.
I feel that they have made strides to address the program, and so for me, it didn't rise to the level of needing to be added in this document.
So the sentence reads, currently, council members also continue to have concerns about the conditions inside our recreational buildings and the lack of resources for our youth, especially at the Arbor Hill Community Center and Hoffman Park.
And clearly, I fully support that. I have pictures to support it.
Okay, so when you're talking about that, your concern, I've heard you and Jamal talk about especially Arbor Hill Community Center. Do you also have a similar concern regarding Hoffman Park?
100% concerned. When I was the director of that park, it was 13 employees at that park. And now sometimes people are working 1 and 2 deep at that park. That's a concern. And, you know, when you walk in that teen center and you don't see anything in there, you know, you wonder why our kids aren't going to the teen center.
So I have felt that Commissioner Jones has actually expressed a little bit of frustration in not being able to provide more services in that building, partially because of what the building is like, you know, like, and so I'm inclined to leave this as is with the understanding that at worst, I think it's going to be somewhat supportive of his position that, you know, he would like more. I think it can be read in that way, I guess.
I just want to jump. When we had that summit and people spoke, I think one of the huge takeaways that day was it was clear that we need to start looking at the money that we're spending on a garage, calling it a community center. And I thought I heard it clearly come out of his mouth that he was going to revisit that the sentiment that he heard in the room that day about recreation program trying to be preventative. I think that you would expect some type of, you would look for something in the budget coming from Parks and Recreation to address what was brought up that day.
And I don't disagree that the services need to be enhanced for youth, but when I read the document, there are 2 parks in particular that are singled out compared to all of the parks in the city. And I represent this ward where Hoffman Park is located. I have personally gone in to do programming myself when invited to do so, and I know that Commissioner Jones has, given the limitations of that space, has really tried to enhance programming. Still missing the mark in some regards, but to single out 2 in particular, I'm not sure what message that sends. And do we
I
want...
have an editing solution, I think.
Okay, I'm all for it.
So I'm going to move these 2 buildings, signaling them out with regard to the conditions inside our recreational buildings. So the sentence would then read, council members also continue to have concerns about the conditions inside our recreational buildings, especially at the Arbor Hill Community Center and Hoffman Park, and the lack of resources for our youth in our parks generally.
So we also have concerns about Lincoln Park. We have concerns about the boxing gym. Like, I have pictures from all
Case
over the
It's
place that has nothing. You know, I guess what we're looking to address, or I'm hoping to hear that we're going to address, that we're not going to have another budget season that Parks and Rec is just going to come up in here and it's going to be the same thing that went on this year that's going to happen next year.
So I heard you now mention other buildings, so, and so then you're coinciding with what Ms. Pliers is saying, and that we shouldn't identify individual buildings.
I think it's a
consensual,
you know, like if you look at the thread that I put up about my feelings about the parks, is people from Rosemont that chime in about the conditions of the parks up there. There's people, you know, pretty much from different parts that has concerns. So that right there shows that it's more than just those 2. The reason why those 2 spoke out is because we were having problems in said particular area that we provide youth programming.
Right, and I just want to make the point, I think we're in agreement, when you single out 2 in particular, then it's saying that we want to focus energy and resources on these 2. Councilman Ballerin at the last meeting highlighted 2 other parks, and so if you keep it broad, it then allows us to go back and talk about parks in general, not just these 2.
And so when you frame it like that, I would be in agreement with you that it's more than just those 2.
Okay, I've taken out the specific reference to those parks.
Yeah, with the parks, as soon as you said Hoffman Fields, that's where the Albany Soccer Club plays. And for a while now, I've been bringing up the fields are in terrible shape. So I don't know if we can include that somehow.
That's not city,
That
that's
makes-
not the city.
It
that's
is city, it's
well,
city land, and it's an
So-
opening club that plays there.
They have to get.
But I think we all have agreed that we're not gonna single out a single park, that we're just going to just put parks as general. So what's next? Like, are we moving on?
So the last thing is, when we list the recommendations from 2019, Ms. Apleers thought that because we're addressing the upgrade of the sound equipment in the Common Council chambers, that could come out. I'm inclined to just keep the recommendations there. You've changed it to ask for an update on our recommendations from 2018 and 2019. So,
But does that have anything to do with the administration, the upgrades in the chamber?
That's
I know
PEG access.
I know that's something that Michelle and council has been working on,
That's outside of.
not necessarily the administration, and that was why I recommended that come out of there.
I just have a point of information on that. From what I understand, they're having a strict reading of that interpretation, and when it comes to the way that it's written and the way the money is utilized, it's for the purchase only. There's no ability to install, train, etc. So as we're moving forward with the budget process, if we're looking to have that money and language carved out correctly to enable being pegged to purchase equipment and install it, and
But that's not what Sarah told me. She said her interpretation, as long, when it came to installation, because I said, I can't install it. There's nobody right now in DGS that can install it. She said that as long the amount wasn't a large amount, it could be included in the purchase price. So I think there's some confusion right now with that. Because that's what she told me. But I asked Sarah on her legal interpretation of the contracts, so that's,
so I'll run it back, but I heard
yeah.
that.
Maybe we should get that in writing.
So there's two different things. There's one, funding coming out of the franchise agreement, and then there's also the money coming out of the Community Development Agency, which is separate. My understanding is the equipment limitation applies to the franchise, or at least that issue applies to the franchise agreement, not necessarily the community development.
Community development is.
Well, only the line for the PEG access to franchise agreements where we discussed it, so.
Okay,
Just,
so I am making those changes, I will make those changes to
okay, fine.
this.
Just on the research council position, folks, we're not at the point of doing interviews yet, but the committee that I'd like to do is myself and Kelly, Judy, Ginny, and Joyce. If that's all right, okay.
For
with
what,
folks.
for the council interviews?
Research council, yeah.
Yeah, I understand that somebody who recently transferred to the council's office is reapplying.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. So, that's all.